Every multiplayer RPG has eventually come across this problem. Two players want to do something together, but one has vastly more time invested in the game, making him much stronger. Everything is either too hard or too easy for one of those two players, unless the game was designed in such a way that it accommodates for that. Games handle this vastly differently, with some scaling players all the way up or down to match the fellow player they're trying to do something with, to outright ignoring the issue entirely, and everything in between. The question I'm asking today is, should games even try to help players of vastly different power levels try to do stuff together, or should they just leave it alone? If it's your first time here, I'm Hunter with Hunt for Games, with more than a decade of classic MMO experience in Final Fantasy XI, as well as countless hours of bits and pieces of every other MMO out there. Otherwise, if you've been here before, welcome back, but let's all try to be nice today, because this topic could ruffle some feathers. People get very, very emotional about this one. Look, this issue isn't new, and the further back you go, the more gamers generally just had to kind of deal with that problem themselves. Dungeon crawlers like Diablo 2, the classic MMO EverQuest, and of course Final Fantasy XI at launch. If you weren't the same level as your friends, there was a good chance you couldn't take part in many activities together, if do anything at all. This led to, of course, many frustrations with players. I want to do that dungeon with you, I want to fight that boss. Do you want to go level and gain some experience so that you can catch up to what I'm doing? All those things sound great in theory, but ultimately we ended with like a, sorry, you gotta get good, scrub. I'll see you in 30 levels or so. But of course, by the time they've spent time leveling to 30 levels higher, you were also higher because you kept playing the game. I should mention that it also led to some of the experiences that made MMOs so amazing. It forced players to branch out, meet new people, develop relationships that they never would have otherwise, which is one of the best parts of MMOs. Massively multiplayer online gaming, meeting new people. You'd form a wider network of friends because the players that you normally play with may not always be within the same level range. You had to start branching out and forming this wider social network. You'd level alternate classes you never would have thought to touch because the primary class that you love to play as is too high for maybe some of your friends or some of the things you're trying to do. So you pick something else maybe at random and you're like, oh my god, this class is amazing. And even just at a fundamental level, you try strategies and different approaches to content that you normally wouldn't have tried, but maybe there's no other options to you because that's the level ranges that you had available. But as developers tried to please a wider player base, for good or bad, they started to introduce various forms of scaling. There's no denying that sometimes players are playing mostly for their own friend group, not for the wide array of people that are out there. They just have their friends, and that's totally fine. But if they fall behind those friends and can no longer play with them at all, they may just quit. More importantly, if you have a group-focused game where progression is tied to how many people you can get together at once, and that population is either shrinking or kind of gathering near the upper levels, there's less low-level, newer players joining the game. New players that do join the game will suddenly find it much harder than the previous players to actually make progress. Final Fantasy XI attacked this problem with the previously mentioned level sync, allowing you to sync your party's power level down to the lowest level, or you'd usually pick the lowest level of somebody in your party. Pros, you could totally party with anyone you wanted to from any level in the game, anywhere. Your gear, your skills would all scale down so you could take part in content with them, regardless of how powerful you may be. You didn't even have to buy new equipment, it all scaled down with you. It was great. Cons, you lose all your cool new abilities, all the stuff that made leveling through 11, the new spells, weapon skills, abilities. You lost everything up until the level that you scaled down to. While you could spend time together and both of you could make progress in a meaningful way, it also might be mind-numbingly boring for you, especially if you've gotten used to that wide array of cool stuff you can do. This is a challenge we've faced lately when streaming Final Fantasy XI on Twitch, with lower level friends hopping in a little bit later and kind of worrying about pulling us down to a lower level content that might not be as fun for us. Of course, it's more fun to play with them than without, but it's a valid point and can be concerning. Speaking of which, if you don't know, we stream every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Twitch. Definitely come by and say hi. Let me know your thoughts on all this because I love talking about this stuff, especially live on Twitch. So bring your comments, your thoughts, your concerns. As another example, Guild Wars 2 employed a very different strategy. In Guild Wars 2, you were always scaled down to be level appropriate for the zone that you were currently in. Now, if you'd out-leveled that zone, you would still be pretty strong for the area. But if you were like level 20 and you went to a level 5 zone, I think you'd be like level 7 or 8. You would never scale up, only down. So you continued to have that sense of progressing, strength through the areas where all of a sudden you could expand to new areas that in other games you would have out-leveled while still retaining that feeling of, getting stronger. This approach allows you to continue to enjoy, areas that you would have out-leveled while still retaining that feeling of getting stronger by taking on new areas, more difficult enemies that you hadn't seen before. Pros to this approach, the game continues to expand in size as you're able to access and take on more and more content while never feeling like you're out-leveling areas. You never miss anything. You can always go back and do it whenever you want, and it'll still be at least a little bit of a challenge. The cons are that you never really feel like you've gained so much power that the older zones are just beneath you. You never get that godly strength feeling that so many RPGs eventually give you, and it's one of the best feelings in those RPGs when you've leveled and you go back to one of those starting zones and you just whoop its ass. You never get that in Guild Wars 2. You always are kind of like, I am like pretty effective. Then at the kind of opposite end of that like everything scales spectrum is Elder Scrolls Online. Elder Scrolls Online a year or two ago decided that it would scale everyone always to max level at all times. Even as soon as you enter the game, boom, max level. This works in favor because there's never any analysis of what level you are versus the other members of your party. You can always play together. You can always do whatever you want. Just start playing. The whole idea is just go. The biggest downside I found is that you out-level your gear and you start to get weaker based on the difference of like how far you are above your gear level to kind of simulate that feeling of like as you level and you enter new areas but you haven't updated your gear, the stronger enemies are much more difficult without you getting stronger gear. In terms of how this actually plays, it's really not that different from entering a new zone, facing a new enemy, and suddenly struggling where you were getting stronger and feeling more powerful because like all of a sudden you're like, I think I should update my equipment. That's where I'm probably lacking. But it can happen in the same zone and it just sort of feels weird sometimes when all of a sudden you're like, I'm just like weaker now. I feel like I was stronger 10 seconds ago, but I leveled, so now I'm actually weaker than I was before. And MMOs aren't the only games to tackle this problem. The Destiny games have long struggled to find a perfect solution. I think they've got a pretty decent one now. Monster Hunter World, for instance, has an interesting do what you want, but we're not making it any easier. I think that the enemies just like get more health. So if you and your buddy are like this and the monster just doubles in strength, I don't know if you're gonna help out enough. Point being that every developer, every game has tried something a little different, and I don't think any game has ever perfectly nailed it. There's always going to be a player that ultimately just wants the true leveling experience. They want any discrepancy scaling. They just want to experience the game, strength disparity and all. And then there's always going to be the opposite end, the player that would just prefer to be sharing that experience with friends regardless of difference in strength and how much time investment either of them have. And I've been at both ends of that scale at various points in my life. So back to my original question, was level sync in Final Fantasy XI a good idea? Is syncing in general healthy for the overall strength of the MMO? Or does it make the experience worse? Overall, I think it was something that was critical to help keep 11 healthy, especially from a new player and lower level leveling experience. At the time, remember, grouping was so critical to progression that without 5 other people that matched both your small level range of literally 1 or 2 levels above or below, and you couldn't do both at the same time. You can't have a 4 range, that's too big. And required job types on top of that to make up a good party makeup. You couldn't really progress. Without this change, the game likely would have died off or failed to retain a huge portion of its player base that wanted to continue leveling and trying new jobs. But there's no denying that in the experience itself, much was lost. Whole level ranges could be spent at the same camp, removing the excitement of having to travel to new regions once you'd outgrown areas. There were certain level ranges where like they were a little bit tougher because certain abilities or spells hadn't been acquired yet, but enemy strength was in general increasing. That created this great flow of gaining in strength and feeling weaker again, then gaining in strength, and it created those amazing points of significant improvement that 11 did so well. When level scaling was introduced, that flow was blown up. There's no flow. People started skipping level ranges that they didn't like. They would stick to safer areas or more consistent leveling experiences, and certain areas were just kind of lost to the annals of time. Did I say that right? Is it annals? Annals? I don't know. And let's not forget that with Final Fantasy XI, the skill system, skills would fall so far behind sometimes that players would spend just as much time soloing trying to eke out those skill levels to catch up to what it should be at their current level. That was any time really saved by allowing you to get a party sooner? I don't know. So ultimately, from my perspective, was it a good idea? I think it was the only idea. Something had to be done to allow players of a wider level range to play with each other to continue making progress in this group-focused game without ruining that concept of having it be group-focused. Was this the perfect solution? I don't think so. I think certain other things could have been done. I would have loved to have seen something like the AI trust system, but at a smaller scale. 1 or 2 trusts maybe to fill out a party, allowing for, less scaling of levels, but more filling of spots that you couldn't find a real player for. It's a tough balance, and I'm sure there's a lot of arguments for why that would be a super dumb idea. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what would have been the perfect solution for Final Fantasy XI and other MMOs and online games in the future. Because other games face these similar struggles. Game like Destiny, Monster Hunter. So let me know in the comments, what can games do in the future to help mitigate this problem? Should the problem be mitigated, or should it just be something that players deal with and it's part of the game? I think it has to be mitigated, but I want to hear your thoughts, and it's certainly a fun argument to be had. Can't wait to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, keep on leveling. I'll see you guys all in the next one. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in more videos like this, think about subscribing. And if you already have, don't forget to click that little bell next to the sub button to get notified when new videos go live. Hit me up in the comments with your thoughts on this video, or come hang out and chat with me on Twitch every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And definitely look me up on Twitter or Instagram at Hunt for Games to keep up with what else I've got going on. See ya.